The damage report was started as a daily analysis of the damage being done to our country and to our world. And that damage comes in many different forms. And sometimes in the deluge of news every day, we can start to forget about some of the longer term damage that's happening mostly in the background. But from the very beginning, we wanted to make sure that we did not, for too long at the very least, forget about the environment. And so from the beginning, we've kept a focus on that here at the Damage Report. Earlier this year, about a month ago, we did an analysis of just a few weeks of news on environmental regulations in the Trump administration. And even in that short time span, there was quite a bit that happened. Take a look. When it comes to the environment and Donald Trump, I think we know that, for instance, on climate change, I think Greta said it best that trying to change his mind at this point is probably a waste of time. He's being well paid to hold the position that he has, and he's not going to do anything about climate change in the years remaining as president. But here's the thing, supposedly on things outside of climate change, he does care and we should have certain expectations. For instance, he says very often, I want clean air and clean water, and have been making great strides in improving America's environment. But American taxpayers and American workers shouldn't pay to clean up other countries' pollution. Okay, well that's other countries' pollutions. Presumably we can still pay to clean up our own pollution though, right? In the water and in the air. He said, I am committed to keeping our air and water clean, but always remember that economic growth enhances environmental protection. Jobs matter. So that second part there, well, the middle part, is a lie. But it does reveal a little bit of a truth of what he believes about this. Sure, he likes the idea of clean air and clean water, but he really likes economic growth. And while economic growth does not actually make the environment better, which we'll get into, he thinks that that is a worthy trade-off there. And that's really the problem, because over the past month or so, I've seen multiple different studies where you have had a possible trade-off. You've had what's good for the environment and what's good for a very narrow set of corporations, or even just one corporation. And every single time he comes down on the sides of the corporation. So let's catch up a little bit with some of these recent regulation changes when it comes to the environment and what we should expect going forward. The first does have to do with our water, which he loves to talk about, and that has to do with lead. So you're taking a look at this headline, EPA proposes new regulations for lead in drinking water, which sounds good, especially with that photo of the Flint water plant there. But unfortunately, these regulations are not great. There's some good. Yes, there will have to be better documentation of remaining lead service lines, but that's really about it on the good. The EPA is not moving to require that all lead service lines be proactively replaced nationwide, as some environmental advocates had suggested. The proposal also would not change when officials have to take action. The proposal would establish a lower trigger level of lead with 10 parts per billion from the current 15. But the thing is that health experts say no amount of lead is known to be safe. And so changing it from 15 down to 10 might seem like it's moving in the right direction, but really it's placating some environmentalists when really that threshold should be far, far lower. And certainly the lead service lines that are currently existing should be taken out. Yes, it's complex. Yes, it's going to be costly, but our lives are worth it, I think. And when it comes to water, that's not the only issue. We also have coal ash, and this is even more recent news. Under a new proposal, companies will have to stop placing coal ash into unlined storage ponds near waterways by August 31st, 2020, and either retrofit those sites to make them more secure or begin to close them. Now that sounds good, but not in comparison to what we had. Unlike the Obama era rules, the EPA will allow greater leeway and more time for operators to request extensions ranging from 90 days to 3 years. Now, that sounds bad, that we were going to have these shut down in the near term, and under Trump, it's being pushed out by a number of years, but it's actually worse in some cases. If a company can demonstrate it's shutting down a coal boiler, it can petition to keep its storage ponds open for as long as 8 years, depending on their size. And I think we can all agree that 8 years is a very long time, and it's a long time where a lot of damage could be done. This rule change trades away increased costs for the coal companies for higher toxic chemical exposure in communities from the groundwater near coal burning plants. By giving fossil fuel companies longer to act, more contaminants will inevitably be released into the environment. And some of these contaminants you really don't want to mess around with. One great example of that is selenium. Selenium is a byproduct of coal ash that can cause neurological problems, paralysis, and even death when ingested in high amounts. Now, going about your regular everyday life, you're not going to encounter selenium in high concentrations. But if you happen to live in one of the environments near a coal ash deposit, and that generally is going to mean poorer people, working class Americans, people of color, you just might. Because a 2010 report from Physicians for Social Responsibility and Earth Justice found that water samples collected near coal ash contamination sites had selenium levels that were sometimes 580 times higher than the federal drinking water standard. And that's horrific. And the prospect of having to drink water contaminated in that way by something that can literally kill you for up to 8 years longer than we would have had under Obama, that is truly scary. So that's the water. What about the air? Well, a new study released Tuesday found that the amount of pollutants in US air rose between 2016 and 2018 after 7 straight years of improvement. 2 economists who conducted a study of Environmental Protection Agency data found that particulate matter pollution, air pollution dropped 24% in the US between 2009 and 2016, but increased 5.5% the next 2 years. Now, there are multiple reasons for that. To be honest, it is a complex picture. You have things like increased economic activity leading to more trucks on the road. You have forest fires becoming more common, and you have regulation changes as well. So some of this is has to do with longstanding problems with our economy that need to be changed. The fact that for the most part our shipping, whether literal ships or trucks, is incredibly bad for the environment, and when the economy is doing well, it's even worse for the environment. Some of it has to do with wildfires, which of course are becoming more common as the climate warms up, so all the more reason to do something about it. You can also get less pollutants in the air, but then you also have regulation changes by the Trump administration that are very fast in how they operate. Within just a couple of years, you have this rise in air pollution, and that rise, 5.5%, that might not sound like a lot, but for thousands of Americans, it was pretty important. Because that increase was associated with 9,700 premature deaths in 2018 alone. Nearly 10,000 people, or roughly 3 9/11s, died prematurely and unnecessarily because of the air pollution that they were exposed to. And like I said, there's multiple reasons that there was so much air pollution, but some of it was able to be controlled by the Trump administration, and they decided to move in a very different direction than that which had been pursued under the Obama administration. And for thousands and thousands of Americans, it was fatal, that choice. And that was 2018. What about 2019? What about 2020? What if Donald Trump gets a second term? What if those regulation changes aren't changed once again? How many thousands of Americans will die because Donald Trump feels like some of these companies can save a little bit of money by not having to undergo retrofits and regulations and things of that sort? At the very least, tens of thousands, that becomes clear. In addition, by the way, those deaths represent $89 billion worth in damages. That's not nearly as important as the lives lost, but look at that there, $89 billion. But interestingly, those companies don't pay that money. Coal companies don't pay those $89 billion. The government directly doesn't pay the $89 billions of dollars. We do, our families pay by lost productivity, medical expenses, funerals, and all of that. That cost is on us. And so again, they always love to say that they hate socialism, but when it comes to socializing the gains for private industry, they're perfectly happy to do that, even if it costs thousands of Americans their lives. And then we return to climate change, because as I alluded to there with the air pollution, dealing with climate change could also help some of those thousands of Americans to not die. And we're doing this roundup of environmental news on a pretty important day, that day being the day that the US formally begins to leave the Paris Climate Agreement. Now, we knew that this was going to happen. He announced that he would do this before he became president. Soon after he became president, he said that he was going to pull out. It has apparently taken a while to get the formal gears going on this. But in terms of the years lost, where we could have actually done something, that is what is so devastating here. It doesn't matter at the end of the day if our name happens to be on a list, even if we are the only country to pull out of the pact. So we are number 1 in something pretty embarrassing there. What matters is the substance. What are we doing in terms of environmental regulations, in terms of subsidizing clean energy, in terms of fundamentally rethinking the way we ship products, the way we consume products, the way we power our homes and our businesses, and the ways that we power our cars as well? All of that needs to be rethought. But unfortunately, much of that has not been done for literally years. We are at best stalling and at worst moving in reverse at a time when we cannot afford to do so. Now, there is a little silver lining here, and that is that while the federal government is deciding not to do anything when it comes to climate change, roughly half of Americans live in a state or in a locale where their government has decided to abide by the Paris Climate Accords, and that is very good news. We are a federal government, we have multiple layers of government, and so it's not all on the federal government. It's tragically, a lot of it is on them, but some of us live in states that are trying to do the right thing, and that is good. And so if you're an environmental activist, and if you're finding it difficult to get anything done at the federal level, refocus your efforts and try to get cities and states to do the right thing. But there's a little bit more dark on top of that silver lining, because while there are states that are doing the right thing, the federal government is also trying to shut down those efforts too. We talked about this recently. Trump is gonna revoke California's authority to set stricter auto emissions rules. And so for all they love to say about they just worship states' rights, when it's the state's right to do right by the environment, they're not so interested in that in Washington, D.C., and so they're shutting that down. And if today they're stopping California from having higher emissions requirements for their cars, what are they gonna do for the other states tomorrow, next year, the locales that are generating clean energy and things like that, having regulations on businesses to make sure that they're cleaner and greener as well? Will the federal government abide that for a second term of Donald Trump? Perhaps it's a gamble that we wanna make. I would say with the stakes as high as they are, we can't afford to. And so when it comes to our water, when it comes to our air, when it comes to our climate at large, Donald Trump being here, it's not just, they're all bad, they're all the same. They're not all the same, okay? Donald Trump has had a singularly bad effect on the water you drink, the air you breathe, and in fact, for thousands of you, your lives itself when it comes to air pollution that has been increased through his efforts. So all of that is very important to bear in mind as we continue our efforts to change environmental regulations right now while Donald Trump is president, and certainly as we get towards the 2020 election. Donald Trump being there is horrific for the environment, and it needs to stop. Thank you for watching this clip from the Damage Report. For more content from the show and access to TYT Network members only exclusives, go to tyt.com/Brooke. Wait, no, it's tyt.com/John. Go to tyt.com/John to sign up.